One of the big changes that we've seen happen is that most startups that were once SaaS startups are now becoming AI startups. And that actually is a difference. What actually is different is those startups now need to do other types of pricing plans other than just seat-based pricing plans. Effectively, those startups now don't need or are making it so their customers need fewer seats. And once that becomes a reality, you need to have a different way to price.
So agentic payments is one of the topics everybody hand waves about. Almost nobody breaks down end to end. Agents generate costs. Agent deliver value. Agents call other agents, but money still has to flow in a way that humans can understand and control. Today's topic is payment infrastructure for the agentic economy. What exists, what's broken, and what has to be built. And I'm joined by Mitchell Jones. Mitchell has spent his career deep in payment systems, leading Facebook's digital wallet across Asia and Latin America, then building Landtable, where they made 401ks usable as a method of payment. And now he is working on Lava Payments to assist companies with accounting for their LLM usage.
How's it going, everybody? My name is Mitchell. Thank you so much for my introduction. The high level, I love working on things like payments and fintech. I've been a founder now for about 5 going on 6 years. And before that, I worked on digital wallets at Facebook. The big thing we do at Lava is we make it super easy for any AI startup to track all of their usage and then charge their customers for it. One of the big changes that we've seen happen is that most startups that were once SaaS startups are now becoming AI startups. And that actually is a difference. What actually is different is those startups now need to do other types of pricing plans other than just seat-based pricing plans. Effectively, those startups now don't need or are making it so their customers need fewer seats. And once that becomes a reality, you need to have a different way to price. All of the tools that helped you get paid from the SaaS era were never really made for agents, both for you just accepting payments, but also for agents doing things.
Yeah, that's right. And it's curious. Right now at Doxy, we are implementing agent level payments. Like, how do people pay us for our LLMs, right? Because when you're building a SaaS company or like an agentic SaaS company these days, you are most likely combining different tool calls, LLMs, and systems together. And it gets really difficult for us to actually understand, like, what exactly is costing us the most money in our, like, funnel.
Yeah, so what we do is we go straight to the core of the problem. What most folks in most other kind of payments orchestration tools don't really do is they don't help you with measurement. So what we do actually very simply is we have 2 products that work as one. We have Lava Build, which is our AI gateway. So that actually enables you to route all of your LLM calls. So let's say you want to use Gemini, OpenAI, Claude. You want to use Claude for reviewing things. You want to use Gemini 3.0 Flash for doing actions, things like that. Well, right now, if you don't use a gateway like us, you're going to have to do that yourself. The value about using us is we do all the integration for you. You always have the most up-to-date models. But also, when it comes time to say, okay, I've had $100 worth of LLM calls from customer A, right? All you have to do is go to us and say, how much do you want to make on that? If you want to make a 40% margin, you just tell me you want to make a 40% margin and we'll make sure you make it. And that's the magic of what we do, because we have Lava Build, which is a gateway that allows you to route calls, and Lava Monetize, which is our payment orchestration that allows you to get paid on top of all that traffic we saw through your gateway. Everyone else really can't do that because they don't do it in a 2-part system. So what all of the other players really do is they say, hey, you have to do all of the work on integrating and setting up all your calls. And if you have 1,000 calls, you have to pass them all to me if you want me to track every single dollar of it. And then you can also get paid on top of, and you can charge your customers based on your cost. With us, you never have to pass us anything because you just used us to build on top of anyway. And one of the things we're seeing is everyone should use an AI gateway, just given the fact that agents are doing so many calls. And because those calls are happening and they can be very variable, it's actually super important for engineers to do that. It saves you a lot of time, and so for most, it's not a question of if they should use a gateway. It's actually a build versus buy question. Do I build my own gateway or do I just work with someone like Lava? And the pitch for us is we're the only gateway that's also connected to payments. to use us, and you don't have to use a bunch of tools in order to build and then get paid on your product and your app.
Right. And it helps you understand where you're spending the most because it gets hard to orchestrate. I think we use 6 or 7 different LLM providers in our production, and having a gateway, like at least for us, would be, yeah, because it's like we use Gina for deep research, Claude for OpenAI, Mistral, like the list just goes on because each of them does some things better than the other. When you want to have optimal orchestration, some tools end up using 4 or 5 different LLMs just because some do things better than others.
You're completely right. You're completely right there. And like, I think that's usually the evolution of where most people get is they usually start on one, whichever LLM that usually they start on either Anthropic or OpenAI, oftentimes OpenAI. But then the more and more you get, like you're saying, into the world of AI, you recognize that, wait, just like anything, certain products are good at certain things. And if you're trying to offer the best experience to your customers, you should just give them the best model for the thing that they're doing. And you guys should be using the best model for whatever the thing is that you're doing. But the only way to do that very easily is where you don't have to have your engineers doing integrations into every single model, keeping up with the latest and greatest. It's just using a tool that allows you to do that. It's very simple. And then one that allows you to charge as well is very important.
Yeah. And I think so when we talk about this being a gateway, right? Does it mean I can plug this thing in and it will auto route my API request as well? Will it help us optimize like our calls? So let's say if it's a customer and they've kind of gone like very high in their credit limit and we want to kind of increase the margins or like optimize their experience, how like can we use this gateway to somehow dynamically switch models?
Yeah, so that's a feature that's going to be coming out in early Q1. We've just gotten a ton of asks for it, and you have to be delicate with that because if you think about that, what that actually means, if you want to do that very well, you have to make sure that customers that are doing that, like our customers or what we would call our merchants who are using that, they're not actually reducing quality on their end customer. Right. Oftentimes, even how models output, like really good models, they speak very differently. So if you look at GPT 5.2 versus Opus 4.5, you can tell the difference in how they speak. So imagine you're one of our merchants who is a customer support merchant, and they're helping people do customer support instances. Well, when that bot is switching in the middle of a call and now sounds very different, right? It doesn't feel very human, right? It gets into the uncanny valley of AI a little bit. And so, yes, this is something that's a very, very popular feature, especially when it comes to actually some of our customers who also just use us for their back end for like coding and things like that, where we have a lot of folks who they don't want to buy subscriptions to Claude, OpenAI, Gemini, Grok for coding. They just want to use a gateway and then they want to route everything through that. That's exactly one of the things where a lot of folks use us and specifically ask for us to do that automatic switch.
It's not that we don't want to buy it, but I have to replenish credits on like 7 separate systems these days.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't want to pay Open Router, like the premium of like having like one single gateway to do it. So I am like on the losing end of that, where I have to manually monitor those balances on like 6 different providers, making sure I don't run out. Because if I run out, I don't want to go on pay as you go per se, because there's a lot of LLM fraud and people can mess with you and like you end up with like those large bills. I prefer prepaid, pay as you go. And if I run out of credits, we have like several keys. Some of them run out, some of them don't, and we like prioritize them. But I have to orchestrate all of that myself. So what does the cost for that look like? Do you take like a percentage from a transaction, or is it like Stripe or?
Yeah. So one of the things that we do that's actually pretty nice is because of the fact that we're an entire ecosystem play, like our kind of gateway costs are much cheaper than most other gateways. A lot of gateways are charging you, like 5% on pass through. So you do $100 of API calls, they're saying $5. Right. We actually, our pricing starts at for $100 of API calls, it's $2. And actually for a lot large volume plays, we actually go even lower than that. And the reason we do that is because we know that a lot of folks are going to be ending up having a payments relationship with us as well, where we don't only just help them route calls, but they're going to take all of that information on their customers and immediately start saying, okay, well, you helped me track $100 worth of cost. I want to make $40, so charge the customer $200 charge the customer $240 for this, right? And so like that's how they think about it, right? Like charge the customer X for it, charge the customer Y for it. How much margin do I want to make? And then I go from there, right? Like that's like how they think about it, or like 100, like, so that's really what we do. And so our goal to focus on is making sure if you're using us just for gateway, that's perfectly fine. But what we recognize is we're trying to create a longer term relationship. And so if we can not only just help you with understanding the margin you want to make and like what you need to do in order to do that, it's pretty important, right? So, for a lot of people, we're the only company that sees it costs $100 for that person. If you want to make a 40% margin, you can mark up your product 140%. We're the only company who really sees that. Right. And because of that, that's a pretty powerful play. So whereas the other gateways of the world are really more trying to do tools around how do we get the most out of this gateway, give you all these like bells and whistles to charge you extra, like, that's not really our goal. So it's a lot more cost effective than most of the other gateways.
Well, yeah, I think the observability component of such tech is something that I would potentially be interested in as well, because like I explained to you our use case, and right now we are building all this manual observability dashboards, but having
Yeah.
like a centralized place and having automations that you can set, especially for different types of customers, and knowing their use cases, how to optimize the models that they are being given for each tool call or execution could potentially be extremely beneficial. Like we had a
Yeah.
person on and they found out that using like, GPT 5.2 mini for certain optimizations or for certain tools reduce their costs quite substantially without giving any performance degradation, right? And that's the kind of experiments you want to find out, right? You don't want to give your customers the worst product because they'll notice, but you want to give
Yes.
them, you want to make this optimizations cost effective on yourself so you don't end up paying as much as you have to.
Yeah, you actually bring up a really good point, which is one of the things that I talk to engineers about all the time. It's like, hey, like this is actually less so about, people always ask like, why do I need to think about this stuff right now? And the reason why is that this is the first time ever since I've been building companies where you can foundationally build a product that will like actually the cost of offering the product will bankrupt you. And like when I first started my first company, right, the cost that would bankrupt you is if you were spending a bunch of money on marketing, right? Like very controllable. Just don't spend on marketing. Figure out other ways to do it. Now, for example, we talk to businesses where they're like, hey, I'm doing, I have 5 customers and each of these 5 customers want me to do actions on 10 million rows. If you run an AI model on 10 million rows, it's going to be so expensive. And for the first time ever, engineers are like, wait, if I do certain things, if I make this agent work certain ways, this might be so expensive, we might not make money on this customer. And that power of experimentation back to you is super important because what that does is it gives engineers the ability to be able to get back to the basics. Number one, they don't want to have to think about payments all day, right? You should just be able to get up and running without having to be a payments engineer. Number two, they don't want to worry about bankrupting the business and getting the CEO or the CTO or somebody mad at them, right? We get them back to that as well. Like these are all foundational things that have always been a truth from an engineer's perspective. It's like you want to just be able to build and you want to be able to build core stuff that people are using. They don't really want to build the plumbing. And so that experimentation is super important because like you were saying, that experimentation allows them to run faster. It allows them to say, okay, we can use this. It's not going to break anything. It's really good. And we're not going to bankrupt ourselves. Right. And, that's actually what Lava really enables very easily for folks. But, I think this is one of those things that's actually very interesting. This is the first era of tech where I've ever had like engineers are kind of, wait, we have to be thinking about the cost of whatever we're building. And that wasn't really like that back in, 2020 when I started my first startup, right? Or for example, before I worked at Facebook, I worked at Dropbox. And if you had asked me or any engineer on my team, how much does it cost every time somebody shares a file? No one knows, right? There's no need to know, right? They were variable cost, depending on the size of the file, but, it's so low, you can treat it like a very small fixed cost.
Yeah. Meanwhile, here, if you implement something that's going to be run away, you don't know what what kind of bill you're going to get in the end of the month. Which brings us to agent payments, right? Can we theorize on that a bit?
Yeah, and like I think there's like a lot of levels of this, but like just for the folks maybe who are less into the lingo, you might hear A to A, and there's actually two things that could mean when people are saying that. Agent to agent could just mean like one agent paying another. So you guys might have heard P2P. That meant peer to peer, right? In the previous era. So usually that abbreviation just means X paying. So in A to A, they're just saying agent paying another agent. Some people actually, when they say A to A, might also be talking about Google's open protocol. So Google created a protocol that lets AI agents communicate and collaborate with each other, regardless of what vendor built the agent. And it's kind of, they're trying to be like a common language for all agents to be able to use. And, that's super important for them to, at some point in theory, like pay for things. I think for us, the big observation here is, there's the what we're focusing on now, but there's the where we're going. Right. I think to really understand how agents are going to move and work, you have to first really understand that there's two areas that most agents are in right now. They're either commerce agents, so that's where an agent is buying you a shirt, or there are service agents that are doing something for you. Right. So, or a pithy way to think about it is if the agent is the product, it's a service. If the agent is buying you a product, it's commerce. Right now, those things are really not linked. The average agent that's doing you a service is not really also doing some end action. But if you think about it in the long run, that's not going to be the case, right? A simple example of this is imagine you. And the second thing I'd maybe highlight is what actually is an agent. All an agent is like, let's just strip away the sexy words. It's an AI workflow, and it's an AI workflow that's chained. So imagine you do an LLM call. Right. An LLM it's going to take in these input tokens and they're going to give you output tokens. But in your LLM call, effectively what you're doing is you're saying if A or B or C, then do a different action. So then you have this chained logic that allows the agent call to get longer. The more you allow it to do, the more agentic it is. So agentic equals autonomy. So those are some of the main kind of things that people are using to talk about the space, where we see both commerce and also services merging together. Is we're still not at a point yet where agents can run all day and just do things on your behalf. Here's an example, like a very simple example of this would be an AI stock trading agent. If you are a trader, right, you need to be dialed in from when markets open till when markets closed. You might have money coming in and money going out, right? And now if you think about an AI agent that's doing that, right, the money coming in, let's just say it's trading on your behalf. The money coming in is you're having to pay it for all this work it's doing. That agent is probably going to be using the best models for reasoning because it's handling money, and you probably want your stock trading agent to be using the best model available. It's going to be doing analysis on ideally hundreds of thousands of 10Ks and hundreds of thousands of pieces of information that are coming out that day, market data, Fed data, BLS data, et cetera. So that's going to get expensive. So you're going to need to pay into that system. But then also that agent's going to also need funds to pay out, right? So let's say it's buying stocks or it's buying certain things. It needs to be able to do both. And, some people always ask like, well, why not just do all of this stuff on cards? And that's actually a good argument, right? Like, why not? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. The problem is when an agent starts doing a lot of microtransactions, all of those things are pinging the card network. And that gets pretty unruly pretty fast, both from the merchant card fees, but also from the pings to the card network. So that's really the answer for that. But, when we look at the future, the main thing is the future is definitely agentic, right? And there's a lot of observations of things that can't happen right now. There is no stock trading agent that can like take in, money and then also pay it out, on the fly. That doesn't exist. And the reason why is, number one, the agent can't measure the amount of work it's doing yet. That's where we come in, right? That agent is going to be working all day. It's got to be able to measure all of it. Number two is it needs to be able to bidirectionally take in money. That also doesn't exist yet, right? A lot of the people who think about commerce think about money going out. A lot of people who think about services think about money going into the agent. There's got to be a system that works with both. And then number three is, as really the foundational technology gets better, more of these protocols like Google's exist, it becomes easier and easier and easier for agents that are built on different systems to work together. So there's three things that really need to happen.
So we really need to start looking at things like budgets, controls, and ultimately accountability, because, you give your agent your credit card, tomorrow you come in and, you have $100,000 of credit card debt. And how do you
Yeah.
control that? Like,
Yeah. So there's a couple things here when it comes down to, budgeting and controls for agents. And, the core problem that I think people are trying to figure out right now is agents are the ones choosing how to think, when to loop, when to act. And that autonomy is inflating enterprise AI budgets, right? So like you set a monthly cap, you hope for the best, but like again, the agent's work is variable, right? So it's like, again, back to that, little lesson we had there. It's a tool, it's a bunch of conditionals. Like, do I keep going? Do I not? Do I keep going? Do I not? And so you can very easily burn through, like a monthly cap, and people are introducing, tools to try to solve this thing. So for example, like budgets trackers that inject, budgets into the awareness of the agent's reasoning loop, understanding your own context window and how to transfer things off, right? Because that's the other issue with a lot of this stuff is like the context windows. And, so there's really all of these things that you have to be able to solve in order for agents to actually function human-like, right? Humans don't run out of context windows for most things. And the reason why is we can easily store things in like the back of our mind and we don't have to think about them for days until we actually need them again. But we have very good recall. From a budget perspective, we're very conscious of how much money's left in our wallet because it, oftentimes our survival depends on it. And so, for a lot of these agents, right, budget controls are going to be pretty important, but the even that, like you have a larger challenge here, which is like their understanding of how efficiently they're doing things, right? That's not just the cap. And that's really what we talk about all the time is like one of the things that's powerful for what we're building is we're trying to make sure that they understand the efficiency with which they're doing their job. And the reason we can do that is because we actually are routing calls, right? Because we are the layer that agents can see how much I did this, I called this, what did my past run cost? But they can actually understand what percentage of their budget are they eating up with every action. If I'm eating up this percentage of things with every action, and I think it's going to take 100 actions for me to do, I'm not going to make it in time. Well, I might need to switch models. I might need to do something different. Like those are the types of reasoning and rationality that agents need to do. And it's more than just seeing how much have I spent so far, right? Like that's a very helpful metric, right? But I think it really gets back to the core thing that we've been screaming since before we raised our fundraise from, Lair Hippo and Streamlined and Westbound, which is that the main thing though here is measurement, right? Like the main thing we're all talking about here is they have to be able to measure and have context. And if you're not really trying to figure that out and solve that problem, like, I think the moving money part is interesting, but the hard part first before you even get into moving money is like, can you help them measure things properly? Because you can't price what you can't track. You can't track what you didn't route. And that is our mantra here at Lava.
Right, especially when you start looking into things like agent to agent, and agent makes a payment to an agent, and it might have different tracking and routing. So how do we, maintain an agent reputation or like SLAs or like, do we need escrow for agents? Like,
Yeah.
here's a bunch of money for you or your agent to do this task. Is that enough? I don't know.
It's funny because we saw the same thing, back when I think people were getting very excited about crypto is most things end up coming back to fiat money and like, how did we do it in fiat? I remember, this is always the case. It's like, because honestly, a lot of the protections, it's not about the technology changing. It's about money effectively works the same way, right? You need to make sure money is in this pending state because a transaction needs to be settled between two people, a merchant and a buyer. You're going to need escrow for that, right? Like there's like simple things that no matter what the system is, usually those things are important. But a lot of people are trying to figure this out of like, okay, like, is there some way we can give like a token-based permission? So it's effectively that the agent gets a budget and they get a, secret token that allows them to have access to a wallet for a certain amount of time. And then they can request more time and refresh the token and things like that is what how a lot of people are thinking about right now. SLAs, APIs, things like that. But I think, when I break it down into like what matters for SLAs, I break it into really kind of probably about like 3 or 4 things. Like number one is obviously latency. Like how do we get agents moving fast and, how quickly can they complete a task and respond to the other agent? 2 is obviously accuracy, right? Accuracy is going to is going to dictate a lot of the SLA. If it didn't do it well, it's got to keep doing it over and over again. Cost per task, and then probably just reliability, like how well did it do it, are like the things that I usually think a lot about.
Because if you think about it, so let's say an agent requests a service from another agent. That other
Mhm.
agent responds back and they have a back and forth, essentially like a discovery demo phase. And then they get a proposal in and they don't have a budget for it. So they have to request you for the approval from that budget. So there has to be a messaging infrastructure that sits there that basically tracks those agent to agent messages, because maybe the agent can finish this job pretty fast, but a human approval, if it's required, can hold this whole action. And somehow those contracts have to hold, or those proposals or things of that nature. Does that make
Exactly,
sense?
right? Like, no, it does. It does. And it's like, that's the main thing, is like, it's the, a lot of the friction comes when the two agents are on kind of different pages, is what you're highlighting there, right? It's like, how do we make sure that when they're on different pages, or they've been given different budgets or different, like, rules of engagement, how do they reconcile those rules of engagement? And like, I think that's where a lot of the protocols are coming in, right? Like, we talked about Google's earlier, and like, people are very excited about that. And like, I think the bigger perspective on this is it's all very nascent. Like, we have to figure out a lot of those core issues, but even before that, I think, if you really get to the core of SLAs and things like that, it's very hard to do them without any form of measurement. If you don't know what agents are consuming, calls made per task, you can't promise anything. And I think, to me, the big thing that a lot of folks need to remember is that the step one is kind of the same thing as kind of what we've been saying, which is you got to get very good at measuring, and then being able to make sure money flows into your agent, right? And we think that the easiest way to do that is use a tool like Lava or something like that, where we can both track everything and route everything for you, but then we attach a wallet effectively to that gateway, where you can then just get money right into that wallet at your gateway. And
Oh, yeah.
so, your agent will be able to, grab that and do what it needs to do. But, the most important thing right now is there's foundational rules of engagement that still need to be figured out, right? And like, that is where a lot of things are kind of, where a lot of the hiccups are when you use these protocols and these frameworks in practice, right? People don't recognize how much of human life is improvisation, and so much of it is improvisation that, like, now we're seeing agents having to like figure out improvisation on the fly, and it's very hard to nail. It's very hard to nail.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And how do you build a trust? And certainly having a gateway confirm what the agent is saying it will cost it to perform a certain task could be a source of trust as well. Where like both
Correct.
agents call a gateway, say, well, you say you need this much tokens to perform this activity. Does that correlate? And then the gateway is like, yes, that correlates. Okay, well then, all right. That's at least I know I can verify, right? Trust, but so gateways can
Yeah.
also serve as a proof point for the agent requesting services from another agent. And like, to your point, this is also abstract at this point. People don't think it's going to happen, but it will. And eventually we're going to be dealing with these massive agent networks on different
Yeah.
gateways communicating to each other. And like,
Yeah.
I can't imagine the scale of what this is going to look like. But
It's gonna happen. And like, the way I would almost like maybe highlight it to folks is like, if you, I remember, and it's usually gradual than sudden is usually how these things work. I remember, I lived in SF for about, 9 years, when I built my first startup, worked at, Facebook, Dropbox, etc. I remember just watching Waymos just with a passenger in the front, with a test driver in the front seat. And that was maybe, that was some years, right? And then all of a sudden, I can get in one by myself, right? And all that is a big, there's like some hardware issues and things you need to do with LiDAR and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But like, it's a big AI ML problem, right? Abuse prevention, big AI ML problem, right? We're now seeing, LLMs, at the end of the day, the heart of what they are is they're just an AI ML model specifically predicting language. And, when you look at just how far they've come so quickly, like, in the field of like engineering, where foundationally, when you're an engineer, you're building so differently today because of them. It's only a matter of time. I think that also, as more of the research budget from these big model labs switches from like just trying to make the most performant new model into like applications, we're going to see another crazy shift. And I think that that's going to probably happen in the next probably year or so of like, wait a minute, these models are getting so good. Like the innovation has happened. Now, how do we start like applying them, allowing them to, like instead of it being, how do we make a model that beats another knowledge test? It's going to be, how do we make a model that can run longer with more context and is more performant in those ways? I think that's going to really be where this is going to start to shift. And that's going to be a floodgate opening of like how many new things we're able to do.
And all this requires payment gateway rails and systems of trust that need to be built. And I think this is like the new internet, essentially. That's what it is.
Yeah, the payment stuff is going to be fascinating too, because of the fact that like, one of the questions that I also ask oftentimes is like, the way we oftentimes think about things in terms of payments is like, what's the first use case? Right. And it's never necessarily always apparent, but there's always usually some use case that like enables different types of payments providers to take off. So they think about it a lot in terms of use cases. And, it'll be interesting on the commerce side. I think in the services side of the house where we are, where it's like helping agents get paid for the work they're doing, it's self-explanatory. You just need to do this and you need to be able to do this in one tool as opposed to having to like add like 3 tools together. On the commerce side, it's a little bit more interesting. Like when you ask yourself the question, what is it that I need to pay for right now? And that I'd prefer to have it done with an agent. It's kind of hard to know. And because if you think about it, like let's go back to the shirt. Well, if I'm buying a $25, $30, $40 shirt, I still want to look at the options, right? Like, is it a black shirt? Is it a white shirt? Is it a blue shirt? Is it a red shirt? Right? Like, and then even from there, like, oh, what's the quality of the shirt? What's the fit? What's the size? All of these things.
Mm-hmm.
So once I need to look at it, I could in theory just use my existing payment methods, right? If I'm looking at the shirt on Shopify or on Amazon or whatever, my payment methods are already there, right? So there's an interesting question around what is going to be the first use case where like agents are like actually the better way to do it, where it's like actually the human doesn't need to make a decision, right? A lot of things when it comes to fashion and things like that, they're taste based, right? And agents don't really have taste yet. They don't have your taste yet. That's going to take a long time. They're really good for search, but they're not necessarily good for, deciding what you're going to want. So some people say maybe it's things like shipping and logistics where they're negotiating down a simple set of goods and then they're just able to execute the process and the transaction once it's negotiated. Like some people say that, but it all in all, it's like from our perspective, we think it's all exciting and, our goal is to just make it easy for people to do some of the first steps of that. And, which use case it'll be will be interesting. And then also like, there's other big questions around like security for, people talk a lot about, do you need like know your agent? Like, do you need a new form of KYC in order for have agents? What does that end up looking like? So there's a bunch of stuff on the payments layer that are going to be very interesting for and needed to be solved at some point.
Yeah, and it's evolving very fast. I mean, there was no agent to agent like 6 months ago, right? Like this, Google didn't release that. So it's all new and exciting. It's a good time to be alive and it's a good time to be building agents.
Tell me about it. It's the best time. And the other thing too is like, if I could talk to, the folks listening to this, the number one piece of advice I'd give you is just go for it. Just go build something, right? Like it's just do not worry so much about, maybe don't build it in production for your company right off the bat. But go start playing around with this stuff. It's pretty powerful and you will foundationally, if you start playing around with it, you might find ways in which you're going to be able to make your life and also your work life much more simple. And if you are like a founder and you're building something, right, like just there's a couple things that will just save you time. Just use a gateway, either build one yourself or just use us. But then also, at the end of the day, it's like you have the ability to experiment with pricing in a way you never did before. Right? Your investors are now open to you doing something other than just a $30 subscription a month. And frankly, for your own margin and metrics, you probably shouldn't do that. And so for the first time ever, it's like super important for everything is experimentation based. And now the cost of experimenting is so much lower because you can just build a lot faster. And so just don't forget that.
This is Mitchell Jones from Lava Payments. Mitchell, thank you for being on the show today. Everybody check out Lava Payments. I think this is awesome. And Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. And yes, definitely check out Lava at lava.so. So you can see us at lava.so. We loved it. And also, if you're a founder or an engineer and you're trying to think through this stuff, literally just add me on LinkedIn, send me a message, and I'll hop on a phone with you myself, and we'll figure out your pricing.
Awesome. Thank you, Mitchell.
Awesome. Thank you so much.